Well, welcome to 2017, where things are pretty much the same. Raw sucks, SmackDown's kicking its ass, so let's talk about SmackDown. Did you miss me? It's okay. It really is okay. You can admit that you missed me. What's going on, everybody? It's your buddy, it's your pal, Spaz Phoenix, the YWC Reality Check. Welcome to 2017. Happy New Year to everybody. Hope you guys had a great holiday, had a great New Year, etc. I had a great month off. It was cool. Some shit went down. Most of all, Raw continued to be garbage. They put on a pay-per-view that wasn't even as good as SmackDown's episode last week, so that's really all you need to know about that. Plus, they're relying on a whole bunch of part-timers and old guys and whatever, and while SmackDown is actually relying on its current roster. Imagine that, imagine that. Started off the show tonight with The Miz and Maurice. We go through a video package illustrating the involvement of Renee Young, which is kind of cool. It's an interesting thing. Didn't see that coming. Cool for me. I don't expect anybody else to hop on board with this. Anybody up here in the Toronto area knows that Renee Young, aka Renee Paquette, used to be on a show up here in Canada in Toronto called what the hell was it called? It was Aftermath, but before it was called Aftermath, it was called Right After Wrestling, which was hosted by Renee Paquette and Norm Souza and Mauro Ranallo at one point, as well as former referee Jimmy Corderas. So very, very cool to see Renee Young in her broadcasting role in the WWE, but very, very cool to see her actually becoming a character on the show. We'll see that as the show goes on. Miz and Maurice come out. Miz touts his success of 2016, talks about his two reigns as the Intercontinental Championship, claims credit for SmackDown beating Raw in the ratings last week. Well, SmackDown beat Raw in the ratings because Raw is garbage and not competition at all, but it still makes me laugh that everybody's going to take a piece of that pie. The commentators were mentioning it all night. We're going to talk about it later in the night when we get into the main title picture, but he calls out Renee Young for an apology because he's made a New Year's resolution to be more forgiving. Complains about having to defend his Intercontinental Championship tonight. Complains about, Renee Young and Daniel Bryan being really, really close as the hosts of Talking Smack. That's the only reason Dean Ambrose got a title tonight. She sacrificed her job and her journalistic integrity for some dirty deeds with Dean Ambrose. Made me smile a bunch. Ambrose comes out, tries to attack The Miz. Miz hides behind Maurice. Ambrose gets the taste slapped out of his mouth by Maurice, and he gets on the mic. Typical Ambrose style. It's the hard part of my night is over because she hits harder than you do, which is fantastic. I don't understand why this match happened next, but we had Ziggler versus Corbin, the two guys that didn't manage to win the title last week, and a pretty damn good triple threat match, I gotta say. The wildcard finals episode of SmackDown last week was pretty damn good. We had a good women's match. We had a very, very surprising new set of tag team champs that we're going to talk about a little later on. And of course, we had the triple threat match, AJ Styles versus Ziggler versus Corbin. We all knew AJ Styles was going to maintain and go on to face John Cena at Royal Rumble, etc., but it was still a damn good match. Ziggler did his bumping around thing. Corbin looked strong as the new guy that they're trying to push, and AJ Styles came in and benefited from Corbin to maintain his title, so it's all good. So why the two guys that didn't win the world title match have to have a match again tonight when we've seen these guys, admittedly enough, fight quite a bit, even back before the brand split when they were doing it on Raw and on pre-shows. But, I mean, it is what it is. Forearms by Ziggler, jabs in a mudhole stomp by Corbin, kitchen sink by Corbin and a choke on the ropes, hard Irish whip by Corbin and jabs in a back elbow. Both men trade punches and they brawl outside for a while. Ziggler eats the apron back first and they trade some more punches. Back elbow, boot, drop kick by Ziggler as we go into commercial break. Corbin standing on Ziggler's head as we come back from commercial break. Now, you guys know I haven't always been the biggest fan of Baron Corbin, and I am one of the few remaining supporters of Dolph Ziggler. But when you see a guy the size of Baron Corbin literally standing on his opponent's head like it's fucking nothing, that's something to smile about. Hits him with a jab off the second rope as well. Forearms, headbutt, a corner splash, a neckbreaker, and an elbow. Basically, the 5 moves of doom of Dolph Ziggler come up next. Lariat by Corbin and a corner tackle. Corbin eats the ring post hard. Famouser by Ziggler. Zigzag by Ziggler, but Corbin kicks out. He gets a beat down in the corner. End of Days gets the, at this point, predictable win for Baron Corbin because he's the one he's the one that's kind of on the rise. One thing I will give Raw credit for is they're kind of doing a pretty beast job of pushing Braun Strowman, surprisingly enough. If you had told me that at the beginning of last year, I would have laughed at you. I think SmackDown's equivalent is Baron Corbin, and he's being pushed better because Strowman is still having squash matches. He's very much in that early Ryback stage of his career. But he's about to take out Ziggler after the match with a chair. Ziggler gets saved by Kalisto, who grabs the chair and chases Corbin out. Now here's where I gotta roll my eyes a little bit, because Kalisto, the rivalry between Baron Corbin and Kalisto was crap. I like SmackDown. SmackDown is head and shoulders above Raw, but they are not perfect. The Kalisto Baron Corbin feud was bizarre and didn't really have a reason to happen, and to have Baron Corbin backing down from Kalisto, who I think is pretty much the smallest guy on the roster, not in the Cruiserweight division, is a little funny. But, you know, Baron Corbin, you know, takes a powder up the ramp, and then Ziggler, in a move that we've all been waiting for about a year and a half, turns heel, kicks the head off Kalisto, and starts screaming and freaking out, screaming, "I don't need you, I don't need anybody, it's always been me, rah-de-rah-de-rah." Part one of the awesome Dolph Ziggler heel turn tonight. Now, I understand why some people don't like Ziggler. It's fine. You know, his main proponent, his main upside that most people that like him talk about is the fact that he sells. Now, boil that down to reality, it means it's good at getting his ass kicked, which isn't exactly the biggest thing in the world to be bragging about, but part one of the heel turn, it could be going a little bit of a different way. In the back, we see James Ellsworth and Carmella flirting awkwardly. I will say, Carmella's not at the top of the women's roster, so if she's going to go off and have a little, like, stupid comedy side story with Ellsworth, it's fine. It gets her out of the women's title picture, and it gets him away from AJ Styles and Dean Ambrose and people like that, which I'm sure none of us are complaining about. Now, go to the back, continuing the Ziggler storyline. We've got Ziggler throwing stuff around in the back. He gets confronted by the Island of Misfit Toys, for lack of a better term. Apollo Crews, Rhino, and Mojo Rawley. Apollo Crews getting up in Ziggler's face saying, "Hey man, we all get that you're frustrated, you're not having the best luck right now, but you know, Kalisto's all of our friend, you can't be doing that." And then he wails on Apollo Crews with a headbutt and beats down Apollo Crews in the back, which is great. We see a replay of the women's title match from last week where Alexa Bliss remained your SmackDown Women's Champion, and with a little bit of help from La Luchadora, which is, it's terrible. The La Luchador thing, it's like the Conquistadors thing from back in the day, but it does make me laugh a little bit, and I've heard a couple of rumors as to who La Luchadora is. One being Mickie James, which would be cool. The other being Deonna Purrazzo, which I would be also totally fine with. But we got Becky Lynch versus La Luchadora in a match, which is really not much of a match. There's some chain wrestling, some forearms by Becky, some mounted punches, exploder suplex, mudhole stomp, and La Luchadora, after absorbing all of that, disappears under the ring. And a very noticeably smaller La Luchadora comes out from the other side. She's totally fine. Hits a successful Twisted Bliss, but it gets reversed into the disarmer, and Becky Lynch gets the quick win. Alexa Bliss is unmasked as being La Luchadora, but then La Luchadora, number one, comes back and there's a double team and there's a DDT by Alexa Bliss, and the mystery continues. I don't really care at this point whether it's Deonna Purrazzo or Mickie James or somebody else, but it's kind of amusing, and it means that they're not really going to do much with the title until the Royal Rumble, where I'm assuming these two are going to have some kind of rematch, and I'm cool with that because their match on SmackDown was great and it should have happened on pay-per-view. Just putting it out there. Contract signing between Cena and Styles for the Royal Rumble for the WWE Championship. Now, if this was happening on Raw, this would be the main event. Take a look at the Kevin Owens show from last night, but just, you know, magical, wonderful idea. We put a match in the main event of the wrestling show. So we have the contract signing here. AJ Styles tries to kiss up to Daniel Bryan about how they were both indie guys and they've known each other for a long time. You know, Cena's not one of us. He didn't do anything to deserve a title shot. Bryan gives both men credit for SmackDown beating Raw last week, which they drilled in once again, which is great, and talks about how this is the best possible title match that SmackDown Live can offer the Royal Rumble, which is probably true. AJ talks for a while. And that's really all my notes say, because this is what I love. I am the guy who did the Cena Apocalypse video a couple years ago. I was the most rabid hater of John Cena for the longest time, and I'm not saying that he's super fantastic now. But the one thing I will say is you get a heel like AJ who's saying a lot of things that a lot of people really do want to say about John Cena, so it's only quasi-heel. And the more AJ gets ramped up in his promo and pissed off and, you know, frantic and all that sort of thing, the more John Cena just sits back with the cocky smile where he's not quite he's in the babyface role, but he's not being he's being a dick. And then after a while, you know, there's a couple of different things he says. He says, you were right about The Rock when The Rock left, and now I'm right about you when you left, and here's a little spoiler for you, SmackDown's been just fine without you. At that point, we have insert a typical John Cena passion for wrestling with a couple extra profanities thrown in speech. Both men signed the contract. Baron Corbin interrupts the proceedings. Once again, Baron Corbin getting a lot of TV time this week, which is fine. Says he's entering the Royal Rumble match and I'll be the next champ. Him and John Cena talk a lot of shit to each other, which is kind of cool, while Cena and Corbin are staring each other down because John Cena says that AJ Styles will not fight him tonight. I want to fight the biggest, baddest guy on SmackDown. Enziguri to the back of the head by AJ Styles ends the segment, and then Corbin talks some more shit to John Cena, who is down face first on the ground, as a heel should do. In the back, Maurice bitch slaps the ever-loving hell out of Renee Young, which makes me happy. Carmella is out there with James Ellsworth taking on Alia. Those of you that watch NXT know who Alia is. Hometown girl of mine from just up the road in Toronto. All good. You know that this is not her sort of official coming up, so you know she's brought out to be a jobber, but she made a decent showing of herself. Collar and elbow tie up and a side headlock by Carmella. Snapmare by Alia, and they trade some roll-ups. Mounted punches by Carmella and a Bronco Buster. Takedown and a headlock by Carmella. And then Alia sort of hits her stride. She hits a jawbreaker. She hits some rolling clotheslines. Northern Lights suplex and a corner spear and a corner crossbody by Alia. But James Ellsworth, of all people, trips up Alia on the top rope, leading to the win for Carmella. Still don't really care about Carmella. I mean, she had the feud going on with Nikki Bella, but that has shifted to Natty, which we're going to talk about in a second. So if she's going to have a couple matches with a couple of the lesser-known female talents from NXT, and that's going to be her role for a while, and then she's going to be with that little science project, James Ellsworth, it's not going to hurt my feelings. I'm not going to sit here and trudge about how Carmella's not being booked properly on the show. Rah. American Alpha took on Breezango. Now let's look at this for a second. American Alpha, the internet favorite, the internet darlings, the one of the most popular teams to ever come out of NXT, and they just became the World Tag Team Champions on SmackDown. Now you got Breezango, you got two guys who individually are quite talented, and both of them are stuck with super shitty gimmicks. So what happened here? Oh, it was a squash. This match was shorter than Goldberg-Lesnar. And let me remind you that Goldberg-Lesnar was indeed brought to you by Raw. Oh yes, but the Wyatts are the real story here. The Wyatts show up on the Tron. They announced that they're calling in their rematch clause for next week, which is fine, wonderful, and a bit predictable. I would have loved if they had saved their rematch for the Rumble. They wouldn't have had to write any more story. They just would have said, we're coming for our titles. You know, the Wild Card Finals was sort of promoted as a pay-per-view level episode of SmackDown, so have their rematch on a pay-per-view stage like the Royal Rumble. Big mainstays like Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt would want to have their big victory on the bigger stage. We might still see that, but we're going to see a rematch next week. Nikki and Natalya. And this segment was terrible. They did everything that anybody else that has ever bitched at Nikki Bella has ever said, over and over and over again. Natalya should not have a microphone. Nikki is better than Natalya, but I will admit she's not the greatest on the microphone either. We talked about the Hart family. We talked about Daniel Bryan being her brother-in-law. We talked about John Cena being her husband. We talked about her being a TV star. We talked about Natalya's mad at Nikki for getting everything for being beautiful, which is kind of her admitting that she's not the hottest person in the world, which is kind of odd. It was a lot of really, really badly scripted bickering and one right-hand shot by Nikki that put Natty on her ass, which made me smile a whole bunch. If this is a match that we're going to see at the Royal Rumble, I could do without it. to be perfectly honest with you. But if they do, throw it on the pre-show or something. Give something better to Nikki Bella. Nikki Bella versus Alexa Bliss. Let's get that on the way. But I digress. Miz versus Dean Ambrose for the Intercontinental Championship was your main event tonight. Miz obviously comes out with Maurice. Mounted punches by Ambrose to start, who's like, you saw him in a promo before the match being one of the other interviewers, not Renee Young, tried to stop him, tried to get his thoughts before the match type thing. He was yelling a whole bunch. I'm going to take the most important thing to Miz, and we all know that's not Maurice. It's the Intercontinental Championship. So he comes out, you know, sort of house of fire, punches by Ambrose, mud hole by Miz, corner chops by Ambrose, who tosses the Miz out of the ring. Miz eats the ring post. Miz eats the guardrail. Miz gets crotched on the guardrail and eats a forearm by Ambrose. Ambrose tosses Miz over the commentator's table, and Ambrose himself eats the steel steps as we go to commercial break. Ambrose tosses the Miz as we come back, and he hits a top rope elbow to the outside. Rolling clotheslines and a corner splash by Ambrose. Corner spear by the Miz, who starts working over Ambrose's knee, starting to tell a little bit of the story of we might see the figure four later on in the match. Yeah, that never happens. Neckbreaker by Ambrose, headbutts, skull-crushing finale, followed by, for the first time in 2017, say it loud and say it proud, the Daniel Bryan silly kicks from The Miz. Oh yes, boot by The Miz, clothesline by Ambrose, suicide dive by Ambrose, and a slap to the face by Maurice, which is almost a disqualification, but Ambrose stops the referee from disqualifying his opponent, which is a little interesting, and I'm sure something that will play out later on down the line, but for right now, it's all good. Maurice is removed by the referee and by Ambrose, who points her up the ramp. Belt shot by The Miz, but the skull-crushing finale is countered into the dirty deeds, and ladies and gentlemen, for the first SmackDown in 2017, your new Intercontinental Champion is Dean Ambrose. I didn't think I would like this match, because The Miz and Ambrose, they don't clash very well together. I'm not really a fan of the whole, like, girlfriends getting involved usually, but the involvement of Renee Young was interesting, kind of unexpected, because she's not even really a valet. She's, for lack of a better term, Dean Ambrose is sticking up for an interviewer. Like, you know, you're picking on a civilian type thing. That civilian also happens to be my girlfriend. You also put our dirty laundry out there for the world to see. Not that everybody hasn't seen it on Total Divas, but it was an interesting little tweak, an interesting little, you know, here's a little bit extra to motivate Dean Ambrose towards the title, and it made me care about a match that I would not typically have cared about, because like I say, these guys don't have the best in-ring chemistry in the world. Is this the last time these guys are going to fight? No. Miz is going to probably ask for his mandatory rematch clause, probably at the Rumble, which I'd be okay with. If Renee Young is in Dean Ambrose's corner at the Royal Rumble, I wouldn't mind that either. I'm surprised that they didn't do that tonight after the interaction between Maurice and Renee Young, but they might be saving it for later on down the line. Now, next week, I want to do a little comparison shopping for you guys. Next week on SmackDown, we've got Baron Corbin versus John Cena. We've got Nikki Bella versus Natalya, which is and we've got the rematch of American Alpha versus the New Wyatts. Well, Raw is relying on a bunch of old guys and part-timers and guys that are going to come out and talk. Oh yes, 2017 rolling in. I'm not reviewing Raw. Actually, I should just let me just take a minute, talk about what's going to go on in this channel this year. Not reviewing Raw. Fuck that shit. Reviewing SmackDown, reviewing NXT starting next week. This week, anybody that watches NXT knows that they've been basically showing extra long footage of house shows that they did on their worldwide tour in Australia and Japan and things like that. So it's old footage that they're showing in to sort of fill the spots, because I don't think they've taped any new episodes yet. So I will not be doing a NXT review tomorrow, but I will resume NXT reviews next week, provided that they are in fact new episodes. I'm not doing 205 Live because the cruiserweights have been ruined by Raw. And that's all there is to say about that. I'm not doing the UK one weekend tournament thing for the new UK champion. I like the idea. I might talk about it in the SmackDown review after it happens, but I'm not going to be home that weekend. I'm literally not going to be around, so I'm not reviewing that either. There is a rumor after the Rumble or after WrestleMania that they're going to do a women's tournament similar to the CWC last year, seeing how successful the CWC was. If that happens, I will be reviewing that, but for right now, SmackDown, NXT, I will continue doing Tackle with Guapo and Kristen as long as they put up with me, and I will be continuing the now bi-monthly Ask the Phoenix Q&As, and by the way, go back 2 videos. Add your questions into the January Q&A. I will be answering those questions the week leading into the Royal Rumble. Thank you to all of you guys. As I said before, love taking December off. Just, it's great. To not be doing any of this and just watch wrestling for the sake of watching it, either loving what I loved or completely ripping Raw apart because they are spitting out some hot garbage. The month off was great. Talked to a couple of you guys throughout December, which was kind of cool. Like I say, always put your questions for the Q&A down in the Q&A. Always put your comments on any video down in the comment section below. It's going to be a good year, I think. I think Royal Rumble, despite the fact that, you know, half of it's being presented by Raw, is shaping up good so far. The Cena versus Styles match should be good. I mean, Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens is Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens, and they stole the Shark Cage idea from NXT TakeOver, and I can say that because I was there. Charlotte versus Bayley, if they're able to do what they did in NXT, will be great, but they're on Raw, let's be real. The Royal Rumble match itself, so far, we've got Baron Corbin, Xavier Woods, Kofi Kingston, Big E Langston, Goldberg, Chris Jericho, and Brock Lesnar. So the Rumble itself is turning out to be okay. There's some rumors of a couple people coming out from NXT and returning, etc., and all that sort of thing. Top rumors I've heard right now are Ty Dillinger, Samoa Joe, and the early return of Finn Balor. All of those would be cool. I don't think any of them are going to win the Rumble, but we will talk about more of that as we go along. Anyways, that's about it. This is the first SmackDown review of 2017. I've been Spaz, your YWC Reality Check. Subscribe up there, talk down there, start a conversation, keep all of these conversations going. Don't be a stranger. I'll talk to each and every last one of you later, but for right now, I am tagging out. Bye, guys.
Freak like me.